I noted when Harold and Amy and the sisterhood were coming up for the Aliyah that I was very fortunate to be served by so many wonderful presidents. But the congregation really is indebted to the fact that we are blessed that we have so many past presidents who are still so involved and actively participating in the congregation. Because one of the things that the congregation has, and it's worth noting as we are celebrating our 75th year, and as we look towards the next 75, is the kind of history that we have. So I had to smile as I was standing up there in front of the ark as I was looking at the Torah as we were closing it, and I looked and it caught my eye that I had made the mistake. Of course, as I said, it was Ellen and her family that dedicated the crowns. But then I was looking and I noticed that the press plate, the Hoshen, had been dedicated by Irv and Claire Ann Goldring and their family. Irv was also a past president of the congregation. And as I said, it is really one of the wonderful things about this congregation, the kind of history we have, the commitment we have, the leadership that we have that continually steps forward. That history also, by the way, is reflected in the fact that we are very blessed in a certain way that people might not appreciate. Oftentimes, when a rabbi retires, the first thing that rabbi does is he goes as far away from the congregation as humanly possible. We are very fortunate that that is not the case. We're very fortunate that Rabbi Moshe Rothblum has been a part of the congregation since I've taken over as senior rabbi, and he's been a tremendous source of help for me during these years, even still. And it is wonderful that he comes here and he davens with us every Shabbos, and it's wonderful to be able to share the bima with him this morning.
I just want to take this occasion to wish a mazel tov to Ilana and Ruvain on the occasion of Leah's bat mitzvah. I married them about 15 years ago, and you did good. You did good. A synagogue in New York City holds marriage seminars for the community. Some are for women, some for their husbands, and some they attend together. At the women's seminar last week, the rabbi asked Rachel about her marriage. Rachel replied she'd been married for almost 50 years. The rabbi was impressed and asked her to take a few minutes and share some insight into how she had managed to stay married to the same man for so long. Rachel said to the assembled wives, "I've tried to treat him nicely, spend money wisely, keep a kosher home, and never look at other men. Best of all, I went to Israel with him for our 25th anniversary." The rabbi responded, "Rachel, you are an amazing inspiration to all the wives here. Please tell us what you're planning for your 50th anniversary." And Rachel proudly replied, "I'm going back to Israel to pick him up." Individuals feel trapped all the time, in relationships, in employment situations, in neighborhoods. But what about an entire people feeling surrounded with all escape routes sealed off? How would you react? Would you yearn for the good old days? Parshat Bashalach describes such a situation and sets the stage for the exodus from Egypt. The Torah recounts how God leads the Israelites toward freedom in a roundabout way. But instead of letting the Israelites leave peacefully, Pharaoh pursues them with an army of 600 chariots. The narrative flows quickly and reaches a crescendo as they catch sight of the advancing Egyptian troops. This newly liberated people who'd seen God's wondrous powers in Egypt cried to Moses in a tone of bitter irony, "Hamibli ein kvarim b'Mitzrayim? Was it for want of graves in Egypt that you brought us to die in the wilderness?" The people were fearful for their lives, At least in Egypt they were allowed to live as slaves. But now a trained army was pursuing them, ready to take vengeance on the Israelites for the 10 plagues. And in front of them, barring their path to freedom, was the sea. In his book, Messengers of God, Elie Wiesel captures the mood of their desperate bind. One could see the Israelites running breathlessly, without a glance backward. They were running toward the sea. When they got there, they came to an abrupt halt. This was the end. Death was there, waiting. Moses, meanwhile, responds to the cries of his people and tries to mitigate their fears. Al tirau, have no fear. Stand and witness the deliverance which the Lord will work for you. For the Egyptians you see today, lo tosifu lirotam adolam. You will never see them again. At this critical juncture in time, with Egyptians breathing down the necks of their former slaves, the sea in front, and Moses delivering a pep talk to soothe their fears, the Torah states, and then the Lord said to Moses, Ma titzak Eli, why do you cry out to me? Tell the Israelites to go forward. Interestingly, we never explicitly read of Moses crying out to God. And it's precisely because of the Torah's silence that rabbinic midrash is introduced. In this instance, the Mechilta interprets the implicit meaning of why do you cry out to me by assuming that Moses must have cried out to God. Having completed his pep talk to the Israelites, Moses must have withdrawn from the crowd and used this time to pray to God. This vivid midrashic reconstruction is fascinating. Rabbi Eliezer said, the Holy One said to Moses, my children are in distress. The sea is forming a barrier, and the enemy is pursuing. And you are standing there reciting long prayers? Why do you cry out to me? For Rabbi Eliezer used to say, there is a time to be brief in prayer and a time to be lengthy. The Mechilta de Rabbi Ishmael further illustrates that prayer was not enough by referring to the biblical figure of Nachshon ben Aminadab of the tribe of Judah. The Israelites in this midrash were standing at the shore of the sea debating what to do when one brave soul, Nachshon, plunged into the waters. Unfortunately for Nachshon, he was no Michael Phelps. He was not much of a swimmer. The Mechilta then states, at the same moment, Moses was standing expressing long prayers before God. And God said to him, Moses, my friend Nachshon is sinking in the water. The sea is closing in, and the enemy is pursuing, and you stand there reciting long prayers? And Moses responded to God, ruler of the universe, what can I do? And God said to Moses, lift your staff and hold your arm over the sea and split it so that the Israelites may march into the sea and dry ground. And according to the Torah, this is what Moses did, and the sea was split. Now we can understand the significance of why Moses cried out to God. He prayed, asking God to help, to intervene, to save Nachshon, and to redeem the people. Paradoxically, these midrashim emphasize that long prayers are not the solution to a crisis at hand. Rather, action is required to save the day. This incident at the sea and its midrashic insights afford us a unique opportunity to better understand the nature of prayer. Prayer probably helped Moses clarify the situation. It gave him needed time to collect his thoughts and get away from the tumult of the crowd. But Moses was brought back to the reality at hand by God. God said, enough prayer. Now it's time to do something to resolve the crisis. And Moses, in essence, learned what prayer must really do, is motivate a person to positive action. While Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel suggested that prayer is an invitation to God to intervene in our lives, he also recognized the finite limits of prayer when he wrote that prayer is no substitute for action, and that Judaism is lived in deeds, not only in thoughts. Heschel stressed that worship by itself is not sufficient for the pious. Rather, our faith should urge us to action, translating creed into deed. On Monday, we observed the birthday of Martin Luther King Jr., who spoke dramatically in Washington about his dream so many years ago. And he acted upon his dream, and it became a reality as he led the civil rights movement into our country. And when Heschel was asked why he was marching with Dr. King, he said, "I am praying with my feet." Similarly, Theodor Herzl wrote Der Judenstaat, the Jewish state, in 1896, expressing his views on political Zionism. He suggested it was easier to postulate a theory than to bring it to fruition. But he also said, Im tirtzu ein zo agada. If you will it, the dream can come true. And in 1897, the first World Zionist Congress was held in Switzerland. Herzl acted upon his beliefs and changed the course of modern history. Lois and I saw Steven Spielberg's Lincoln, which focuses on just a narrow slice of Lincoln's presidency. The meat of the movie, based on a screenplay by Tony Kushner, in turn partly based on historian Doris Kearns Goodwin's book, Team of Rivals, The Political Genius of Abraham Lincoln, covers only about a month of time. But what an eventful month it is. That time is early 1865, a period in which Lincoln struggles to find a way to hasten an end of the Civil War and at the same time build enough political support in the House of Representatives to pass the 13th Amendment, abolishing slavery. This was a particularly daunting task, as Lincoln faced opposition not only from those in the Democratic Party, but from within his own Republican ranks, and even from some in his own cabinet. So he works to build a coalition through political maneuvering, political ingenuity, and outright political bribery. But when Confederate leaders approach him with an offer of peace talks, things get very complicated. If the war ends before the amendment is passed, Lincoln realizes needed support for it will evaporate. What plays out is something like C-SPAN 1865, and what emerges is a portrait of a man on a tightrope, determined to do what's best for his country, and determined to work with whomever it takes in Congress to get it done, even though it could result in precipitous presidential peril. It's not easy, nor is the act of compromise always satisfying, but it is effective. And as much as our current leaders seem to have forgotten, it's how the system is intended to work. And that is a beautiful thing. What was even more beautiful was the realization by Lincoln and his supporters that the Emancipation Proclamation was not enough. It had to be followed up by feet on the ground, by an amendment to the Constitution, abolishing slavery once and for all. Lincoln, Herzl, King, and Heschel translated their beliefs, their dreams, their prayers into reality. And that is exactly what prayer demands of us. To pray and then to act upon our prayers. Otherwise, our prayers become empty words and hypocrisies, hollow phrases, all in vain. Parshat B'Shalach recounts that the sea was split and the Israelites walked through on the dry land. Having witnessed God, they entered the wilderness of Sinai and proclaimed, Az Yashir Moshe Uvnei Yisrael, singing a song of unparalleled poetic beauty and praise to God's saving powers. As we heard, this Shabbat is known as Shabbat Shirah, in recognition of the song which Moses and the children of Israel sang, a redemptive song which came about only because Moses acted upon his words of prayer. In essence, we must live and express the words we pray on this Shabbat and throughout our lives. We should strive to respond to the words we daven. On this Shabbat Shirah, the words of Psalm 96 can guide us. Shiru l'Adonai shir chadash. Sing unto the Lord a new song. As we sing unto the Lord, let our voices lift our hearts. Let our voices rise in prayer. And let our prayers lead to righteous acts as we explore those roads less traveled, so full of challenge and opportunity. Amen.